and Anna, I can see that you've already got you've got all of the emojis as well, which is excellent. Great, good. So risk management is, I think it's a really interesting topic for our sector, because I think we are sort of caught between two positions. On the one hand, you've got this, which is, you know, you've got to take risks, you've got to experiment. We're working in really difficult places. If you don't take risks, you don't know what's going to work. You've got to push the boundaries out. So you've got that side of it. And then maybe the opposite, another way of looking at it, is if you don't know what you're doing, there's always a risk. And sometimes I've seen risk management in NGOs sort of, there's sometimes like a pendulum between anything goes and no risks at all. And I think that's really unhelpful, actually. I mean, we do work in difficult places. We work with some of the communities, populations that have, very poor, difficult geographical locations, different socio-political situations. I mean, it's tough. So I think there is always going to be risk. You can't eliminate it. We can't make it go away. So I just think we need to find ways to manage it, be in control of it, and not let the risks be in control of us. So, that's a little bit of a framework. And I quite like this because I think this is a really nice example of a mouse that is managing risks. Well, we don't know if it's going to be effective or not, but at least the mouse is trying. Yes, there's a risk. It may go horribly wrong when the mouse gets the cheese, but maybe the helmet will be enough. So I just think this is a nice way of looking at risks in our sector. We are going to have to face some risks, but let's try, and we want in a systematic way to find some methods to help us understand what they are, analyze them, develop a shared understanding about the risks, but also, I think, take actions. And those actions might be quite major. It might be that we've got to stop a project. Well, okay, that's not bad. It's better than letting the risks get on top of us or controlling us. But maybe we can take some simple mitigation actions, like the mouse is, putting on the helmet, and that will help us reduce the impact of the risk or the probability of the risk happening. So, very quick bit on definitions, all right? Because sometimes the words assumptions, risks, and issues are used as synonyms, and they're not. Okay, so an assumption is a statement that is used in your logical framework, theory of change, or results framework, and you're making an assumption about achieving your outputs or your outcomes. For example, you might assume that if you build latrines, people will use them. That's an assumption. You might assume that if you train somebody, they will use and apply the learning. It's an assumption. They might not. An issue is a real problem. It's happened. I'm driving along. I drive over a nail. I have a puncture. I've got to stop. Got a flat tire. I've got to do something. I can't just carry on. I've got to change. I've got to change my wheel. It's a real problem. It's happened now. A risk is in the future. It has not happened yet, but it might. And there is clearly a close relationship between assumptions and risks. And we'll come on to that in a little while. But I just wanted to just be clear on these definitions. So before I go on, are there any questions about the definitions between assumptions and risks? Just let me know in the chat, raise your hands, just let me know if there are any questions or not. Over. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Anna. That's great. April, are you okay with everything? Or do you have any questions at this stage? All good. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. So, I think, you know, when we look at risk, we've got sort of these three questions that we can be asking ourselves. You know, what are risks that every project will face? What are the risks in your projects right now? And then how do we prioritize, there's a typo there, and how do we document the risks? And, you know, whatever we're doing, we could ask these questions. So, question for you, what are the main risks in your projects? And because it's a small group, it would actually be quite nice to hear what you've got to say. So, have a think about it for a moment. And I'd just be interested to learn from you, Anna and April, what are the big risks that you're seeing at the moment in your projects, in your organization? And they don't have, if they're development projects, that's good, but if they're projects at home or it doesn't matter. I'm just interested to learn what are the big risks that you're facing at the moment. So, Anna, let's start with you. So, Anna, just please click on the talk button, and it would be lovely to hear from you. What are the big risks that you see in your projects at the moment?
Well, currently we are developing a resource for our country and project offices, and this is a resource to provide kind of guidance on a multitude of topics, you know, for you know, starting a project in a new country or things like that. And well, this is an online-based tool, so we can actually have, you know, the latest and greatest information. So some of the risks identified with that, well, there is a big risk in terms of the technology and people not being able to access the tool. And another one would be, you know, although the information made available to them, people just not using this information and applying it, and therefore, you know, having some compliance issues, basically. So those are a couple I can think of in the current project I'm working on.
Yeah, and are they good? Are they big? Yeah, I mean, one of them is the whole access issue, and the other one is, are people going to use it? You know, I mean, you know, you know, and that's like making an assumption, isn't it? You know, we assume, you know, you give people, you know, that sort of build it and they will come. Well, maybe you build it and they don't. Funnily enough, I've just been talking with, I'm in the Plan International offices in the south of England in Woking today. And one of the things, I mean, they are one of our member organizations, and I've been talking with them this morning about exactly that. And so that's great, Anna. So it would be great to hear from you, April. And Julie, sorry, Anna, your microphone. Okay, that's off. So April, it would be lovely to hear from you. What are the main risks that you see in your projects? Over.
It's funny. It's quite similar to Anna's situation. I am developing what we're calling the program management approach, which is a platform and toolkit for project managers across a range of issues in project management. And you know, we don't have in our organization the best track record with change management initiatives like this, and there have been previous iterations of this that really didn't take off, and so you know, there is a a definite risk of lack of uptake. I don't know if you would classify this as risk assumption or issue, but also in terms of the staff across our organization whose time I will be needing to implement this. There's a lot of risks of their time being pushed and pulled in various other directions that would not allow them to actually execute on what I need for this to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, April, and it's, you mentioned, is it a risk, is it an issue? The risk is in the future. The issue is real. It's happened. It's, you know, it's already happening. So, and you're looking as if you're going to be rolling this out. So it sounds like a risk. It's something that has not happened yet, but it might happen. And yeah, it's amazing how many people. I see what you mean, Anna. So one thing I would, you know, encourage you to do, I really mean this. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but swap emails or Skype. You can just stick it in the chat. Talk to each other. You know, it's just amazing how often in NGOs I find that we start, you know, an initiative, and somebody else is doing almost the same thing, and we could, you know, work together, help, learn from each other so easily. And there might even be synergies as well. You know, you might be rolling out to the same country at the same time. You know, so that would make the training so much more cost effective, but also so much richer, and, you know, to bring organizations together. So I think that's really, really, that's fantastic. And again, April, some of the risks that you're talking about, I think you've got a number of them, and you mentioned something that's quite interesting from the past, which is it didn't go well one time, which means that I think people can be negatively disposed towards doing it again. Oh, we tried that, it didn't work, which actually I think means risk management is even more important. Because we've, you know, it's an opportunity to articulate that. And what we're trying to do in risk management is go from messy generalities to something that's quite concrete, and that we can do something about it. And I can see that Alejandra has just come in and is doing the audio tool setup. So Alejandra, welcome. Thank you for coming in. Can you just let me know in the chat, Alejandra, if you can hear me okay? Just let me know. Yay! Good, fantastic. Alejandra, hopefully your microphone is working as well. So I just asked people this question at the top of the screen, which is, what are the main risks in your project? So Alejandra, if you'd like to just click on the talk button, which is top left, by this, but yeah, you've got it there. And then just tell us about the main risks in your projects at the moment. Over to you, Alejandra.
Hi, good morning to everybody. Well, I believe one of the most important or main risks that we have or we face here sometimes is the changing of the staff. Not only in the managing area, but technical staff. Sometimes the project does not have enough budget to pay the well-trained staff and keep them during the whole time of the project period. Sometimes they are teachers or therapists or ophthalmologists or residents, and they just look for another option where they can be paid more, even though the organizations where they work for or where we support the project, they pay for some trainings, but they don't stay the whole time of the project. I think that's one of the most important risks that we have here in the project. I believe sometimes also we had a few problems with the managing of the budget. At the end of the year, they still didn't spend all the budget according to what they have planned, but this is not a big issue. They have savings for the next year, but like I said, we know they have the funds, and we just have to work with them. What are they going to spend these funds for next year?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I thought that was really interesting, actually. Well, I thought all three were great, so thank you, Alejandro. And I think all of you qualify for virtual cake and coffee. The nice thing about virtual cake is that it has no calories. But they're all really good. And Alejandro, what I liked was that you're really focusing on something that's quite internal, which is something like staff turnover. But it could also be external with local partners. I mean, and I'm amazed how often I see, you know, my job in Lingos is I work with our members and non-members in anything to do with project management. And it's amazing how often I see projects, the schedule is wrong before you start the project because it assumes you're going to have 100% of the staff 100% of the time, and you won't because you never do. So just learning from the past. I mean, what was turnover last year, the last 2 years? It was 20% last year, 25% the year before. Next year, it will be between 20 and 25%. So just making an allocation for that learning from the past is one of the easiest, quickest, and best ways of managing risk. And I think it also takes us to our triple constraint, and we talked about that in an earlier webinar, but I'll go over it in again right now, because actually a way to think about pretty much anything in terms of projects, I'll just draw this on the screen, is you've got what we call the triple constraint, which is cost, time, and hello Deb, welcome, and scope. So I'm just putting that on the screen. And in a way, you know, with project management, we are always trying to keep these in balance. If I change your cost, if I reduce your budget by 20%, there will be an effect on either time or scope. If I reduce your time by 25%, there will be an effect on cost and or scope. It's going to be we're always trying to keep this balanced, and you can see with, you know, the risks that you were talking about. If, for example, you build it and they don't come, you're going to have to spend more money doing more awareness raising. It's going to change the scope of your project. You know, if, for example, you're worried about turnover or capacity, if your partners, your staff don't have the right skills, you're going to have to spend money to train them. So understanding this at the beginning allows us to make an allocation in the project. So you're integrating risk management activities into the work that you do. So let's move forward. And you know, here we've got some examples of risks that we might have. There might be a risk to do with political interference. Many of us work at places, I mean, I think, Alejandro, you're coming in from
Quito.
Coming in from
and
Quito.
We are the regional office for Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah, so, you know, you're going to be dealing, you know, definitely. I mean, I used to work in Latin America. I was Oxfam's program director. And I was in Mexico City for 3 years, and you're dealing with natural disasters all the time. But then it's amazing. For example, Central America, you know there are going to be floods. Every year there are floods. You don't know quite where, you don't know how serious. No, sure, but there are going to be floods. So you can make an allocation. If you don't need it, fantastic. But to have all of your programming across Central America with no allocation for floods is crazy. And you could argue the same for tropical storms, especially in the Caribbean, places like that. But I mean, we can learn from the past. We might well have misallocation of resources, so that might be fraud, it might be simply misuse or an inappropriate use. There are lots of things that can happen there. This is an interesting one that almost never makes it onto risk registers, currency going up or down. I was actually in Abuja last December in Nigeria, and the government, you know, they devalued the currency by 10%, and people couldn't predict that. However, you know, and it really was out of the blue, but you can look at trends on exchange rates, inflation, stuff like this. And, you know, one of the things that I find is that sometimes the program staff budget using whatever the budget rate is on the day they do the budget. But if you're talking about a 2-year project, I mean, let's say you're doing your budget in Brazil, and the current inflation rate is massively high. Well, you've got to make an allowance for that in some way. I mean, you might have an average rate or whatever it's going to be. But there needs to be, you know, we can think forward, and it's not perfect. No, it's not. We might be wrong. Yes, we might. But just thinking about it and making an allocation means we are probably going to be less wrong than if we do nothing at all. This is a fun one. The donor changes policy halfway through. Yeah, there's a risk there. So what can we do? Well, we can talk to the donor. Can we eliminate the risk? No. But just by thinking about this might lead to some actions to help us learn a little bit more. Assumptions, I mentioned this before. Every assumption in your logical framework is a risk. The difference is that assumptions are usually written in the positive, risks are usually written in the negative. So you assume that if you give people a project management methodology, you assume that they use it. In a risk, you're saying, if they don't use it, you know, we give them this, there's a risk that they don't do it. So just by rewriting an assumption in the negative, you can turn it into a risk, and that allows us to do something about it. So we assume that there is going to be a low turnover rate. The risk is, if there is a high turnover rate, it's going to cause us delays, extra cost, etc., etc. Social unrest. And again, I've seen so many projects which were in volatile socio-political settings, and you knew there were going to be elections, for example, over the lifetime of the project, and there was no allocation made. So you end up with delays, but if you know there are going to be elections, as an example, you know there are going to be elections, you know that normally when there are elections, the country shuts down for 2 weeks, build it into your schedule. Here we've got our point about staff retention, skills and capacity, both of which you've mentioned, which I think is great. And for me, probably when I've done evaluations of projects, the biggest source of project, should we say, problems that I've seen is not having the right skills or capacity, either in the staff or the partners. You know, and it's not rocket science, but if you don't have the skills, you're going to have a problem. And it will probably be big, and it will cost you a lot of money and cause you a lot of delays. So, you know, if you understand the skills that you need to do the work, assess your staff, your partners robustly, include it in the program plan and include it in the budget. I mean, one of the interesting ones I've seen for those of you who are rolling out project management frameworks, something that's really interesting is that people often put the tools first. And, you know, I've seen several examples. People develop a tool, but forget about the people and forget about the process. And then when they're happy with the processes, they realize that the tool doesn't support the process. So the tool is now getting in the way. So I just think we need to try to do what we can to anticipate. And then people don't want to participate. It could be community people, partner organizations. Okay, what are we going to do if this happens? We might do some more awareness raising. We might need to choose some different partners. But if we are aware of this, we are better able to manage it. Okay, so these are just examples of some of the big risks. And I think it's interesting to remember the internal ones. And I'm very happy that when we spoke about that, you were talking a bit about those. Okay, so what can we do about it? Well, we've got 4 basic responses, and I think there is sometimes the dividing line between them is quite fine, and sometimes we might need a combination of them. But you can simply avoid it. You think there is a risk of conflict in one area of a country, so you decide to run the project in another area of the country. You avoid that risk completely. You might give the risk to somebody else, and funnily enough, we do this all the time through insurance. We take out insurance on our vehicles, our offices, for fire, stuff like that. And interestingly, I mean, we've done a lot of work with Heifer International, and they're doing quite a lot of work in some places around microinsurance for livestock and things like that. But I mean, we are giving the risk. Effectively, we are paying to give the risk to the insurer. Mitigation, which is probably the most common. We do something. We take an action to reduce impact and or probability. And finally, and I think this is interesting, you live with it. Nothing you can do about it. We will live with it. However, I feel very strongly that this is only acceptable if we've taken a decision. If we discuss the risk, we decide to accept it. If we just do no risk management, then by default, we accept everything. And I mean, it's crazy. If you're driving along and it's a single track road and you see a lorry coming towards you, you don't just hope that the lorry will stop. You do something about it. So I think for me there's an important point here, is that risk management is all about participation, and it's about getting a shared understanding of risks and what we're going to do about it and who's going to do what. So to do that, we need some tools. And the most common tool is a risk register. And this is a very simple format for a risk register. All we are doing is we are saying, well, if the risk happens, what impact will it have? And we're saying, how probable is it? And it's again low, medium, high, severe, moderate, and low. This is very simple, and maybe for some projects this is enough. Okay, fantastic. I think it's really important that you choose tools to suit your projects. If a tool is too complex, it never works. So there's a balance. Okay. Maybe this is too simple. So there is another format, which is a quantifiable risk register format, and quantifiable because it has numbers in it. I'm going to talk you through this, and then I'd like to get your reflections on this and what you think of it. So the first of all is a risk description. We say, oh, well, if we don't do those recruitments, the project might be delayed. There'll be delays. We might need some extra funding, resources, if the latrines are not used. So this comes from the assumptions in a log frame. And if there's violence at election time, we might have a big delay. We might need to cancel the project. So first of all, I'm describing the risk in terms of the impact on time, cost, and scope. The rain is not a risk. The rain is the weather. A 3-day delay caused by the rain is, if it rains really hard, we get unseasonable weather and it causes us a delay, okay, that's a risk. Election violence is sad and it's socio-political, it's not a risk. A delay to your project, that is a risk. So I'm trying to think about risks in terms of, if this happens, what is it going to do? And I'm scoring it. I've got some numbers, and there are different formats. Sometimes you see them out of 3, out of 5, and what's the best format? Who cares? Doesn't matter. It's whatever format works for you and your colleagues. I like this one out of 10 because it's simple. Probability out of 10, impact out of 10, multiply it together to get a score. So I'm saying 5, 6, 4, 5, 2, 9. And then you say, okay, where do the numbers come from? It looks scientific, but it isn't. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make people get off the fence, and I'm trying to externalize what is in people's heads. So maybe if Julia and I are discussing a project, and I say it's a 5, and she says, no, it's much worse now, it's a 7. So why? Why not? Why do you think it's that? It provokes a conversation, and I sometimes think that probably 80–90% of good project management is about people having the right conversation at the right time, the right people, right conversation at the right time. And a tool like this helps to provoke the conversation. It gives it a structure, and it helps to document it. Interestingly, a 4, a 5, and a 6 would all be moderate, medium, something like that. But here we are starting to differentiate, and as you multiply through, it starts prioritizing your risk. You can't manage everything. Well, maybe you can if you've got lots of time and big resources, but you want to be prioritizing your big risks. So here we're going to prioritize that. Something else that I like about scoring is that risks don't stay static. They're not always the same. Things change. And so if you had a risk register at your team meeting, you have it as an item on your agenda. Okay, what we get, maybe it's every week. Okay, risk management. Here's the risk register. Are there any changes? And somebody says, no, but somebody says, yes, actually, yeah. I've just been talking to the partners, and the real issues here. I mean, I don't think people are going to use it. The feedback is not very good. Okay, well, what do you think it should be? Oh, well, I mean, I think we should probably make it higher than that. I think we should make it an 8. Why? Why not? Okay, well, then we talk about it, and we agree it should be an 8. The team agrees it, so we've got a shared understanding. And automatically, this changes, and it now becomes, I'm just going to put it in on the screen, so that 4 is replaced by an 8, so we get 8 multiplied by 5, so we get 40. So immediately we can see that this risk is now more important. So it just helps us focus a little bit on, which are the most important risks. And I think it's important to do this because risks are not managed by bits of paper. They're managed by people discussing, taking decisions, and then doing something. Then the last column is the owner. Who is going to manage this risk? And these are just the initials of individuals. And then the last column the actions. I mean, that's fairly straightforward. I mean, what are we actually going to do? All right, so this is the format of a quantifiable risk register. What do you think? I'd just be interested to get your thoughts about this, actually. So let's just pass the microphone around. So, I mean, April, let's start with you. I mean, have you seen a format like this before? What do you think of it? Is it helpful, not helpful? What's easy, what's difficult? Over to you, April.
I did see something like this as part of the PMD Pro. And yeah, I do, I mean, part of my tuning into this webinar is not just, you know, to look at risk management in my project, but thinking about this as a tool for our project managers to potentially include in our approach. And I mean, I feel like even the act of articulating these risks and thinking about them is useful because, you know, a lot of times they're there floating about, but not really looked at in the face and owned, as it were. So yeah, I could definitely see the utility.
That's great, thank you, April. And I agree. I think you've got a good point, because often, you know, we just make assumptions about the risks. They're not actually articulated, and then what that means, if you've got 10 people on the team, you've actually got 10 different understandings about risk. And you know what I think is helpful about tools like this, they take stuff that's in your head and they get it down, and then people can disagree. That's okay. You just want to get the disagreement early and not halfway through the project. And Alejandra, I mean, what do you think about it? I mean, is this something that you've seen, used? I mean, what are your thoughts about it? Over to you, Alejandra.
Well, yes, we use this similar tool. We work with PCM for planning our projects, and I think this is very useful because it shows everybody in a very graphic way how something that maybe we are not aware of can cause a big impact in our projects. But what I think is the most important thing is, even though we do this at the beginning of the project, we need to have this in mind while the project is being developed, because sometimes we can just do this and keep it in our desk and forget about the risks that we think at the beginning of the project, and we just let them sit down there and we forgot that we have this very important and useful tool.
Fantastic, and I completely agree with you about, you know, bearing it in mind as you develop the project and manage it, you know, and because risks change. You know, we don't have a crystal ball. Sometimes new risks appear, sometimes other impact changes, so we've got to keep it live and keep it documented. And Anna, what do you feel? Over to you, Anna.
Well, yeah, I do like this tool. It's simple enough, I think, to really, you know, all different people can use it and understand it. And I like that it's a living document, and we're documenting the risk and how they're changing over the course of a project. And also, it's a useful tool to have the discussion around risk with your project team or partners. So, yeah, I like it.
Fantastic. I'm really glad, Anna. And it's very much about, again, this ongoing documentation. I mean, any project management tool, if it's used once and then put in a locked desk with a sign on the door saying "Beware of the dog," it's not going to be very helpful. So it is absolutely about, the ongoing use. And Deb, it would be great to hear from you as well. So just go ahead and click on the talk button, Deb, which is top left, just under the picture of the speaker. And it would be great to get your thoughts about the risk register as well. So over to you, Deb. Okay, understood. No worries, Deb. I completely understand. But please feel free, Deb, to I do understand your situation, but if you want to ask any questions, please do. Put them in the chat, or you can, raise your hand and whatever you like. But I do want you to feel that you can ask questions. Okay, so everybody likes the tool. Good. I'm now going to make it more complicated. All right, because sometimes, Anna, yeah. Sure, of course I can. I mean, what I'll do, I'll share a template. Well, two things. I mean, this is being recorded, so we will be sharing the recording, and I'll just send out a simple template of the risk register as well. No worries, Anna. Okay, so I think there's one challenge is that the risk register is sort of here. It's things that we think we know might happen, or things that we know are going to happen. All right? So our risk register, in many ways, is helping us with all the stuff that is here. Okay, but what about all the stuff that is not there? All the stuff that is either we don't know but we could, or that we don't know that we don't know. So this is the Johari window, Johari box. But I do think it's relevant for risk management. And sometimes you see projects that were really flawed by a major risk event happening. And you think, where did that come from? That was out of the blue. And no, none of this is easy. But I do think there are things that we can do to start moving risks towards, we're trying to move it towards the top part of the box. This is what we are trying to do. Because when it's up here, we can put it into a risk register. When it's down here, it's much more difficult. So a tool to do this is a knowledge map, because a lack of knowledge means that you do not know enough to know what the risks are. So we can do one together. What are the areas of knowledge? What does your project need to know to be successful? And let's just write them in the chat. What does your project need? Does it need to know, for example, about capacity building? Does it need to know about agriculture? Does it need to know about food import policies? What are the things that your project needs to know? What do the people need to be good at? What areas of knowledge are needed in your projects for the projects to be successful? And just write them in the chat, and then I can put them onto the knowledge map. It's just nice because this is a small group. We might be able to build one between us. So what are the areas of knowledge that you think that your projects might need? Capacity building. Okay, thank you, Alejandra. And I'm just going to put that onto the main screen. There we go. We've got capacity building. Let's get some more. Let's get some more areas of skills, areas of knowledge that you think your project needs to be good at. And I know it will be a composite of different projects, and it doesn't matter. Donor regulations. Thank you, April. So I'm going to put that one up there. And I'll put this one. Okay, there we go. We've got donor regulations. Let's get a couple more. We don't need one for every. We don't need one for every axis. I mean, we start by thinking, what are the areas of knowledge? We need to be technology savvy. We need knowledge of technology. Okay, perfect. Let's see if there are any more. And I can see a couple of you are still writing. Financial, beneficiary knowledge and financial and administrative tools. Okay, this is just examples. These are all great. And I'm just going to put these onto the screen. Oh, that doesn't help. That's way too small. Bear with me a moment as I write them onto the actual screen. And it's not cooperating with me at the moment, so I'm going to do it a different way. There we are, there's one. And now for financial and administrative tools. Okay, so we've decided that our project needs to know about this. All right, so the next thing to do is, all we're going to do is we're going to mark where we are, and 0 or poor knowledge, a lack of knowledge, is in the middle. So I'm just going to put 0 here. So this is, we don't know very much about it. And I'm just going to put 10 out here, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be 5. It could be, it might just say hi. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You know, or you might have it out of 5, out of 3. It's all you're doing is you're indicating that the center is very low at knowledge, and the outside is a high level of knowledge. And so all I do now is say, well, donor regulations, how good are we? And I say, yeah, we're quite good at that. So I'm going to mark us out there. Technology savvy, not so good. Capacity building, okay, but not great. Finance roles, we're really good at that. We know a lot about that. Beneficiary knowledge, we know a lot about that. And then I'm just going to join these up, and we very quickly see a couple of things. In terms of risk management, we are probably in a good position to understand the risks around donor regulations, beneficiary knowledge, and financials. We know a lot about this. But if we are not technology savvy, how do we know what the technology risks are? It means we really don't know. So there may be technology risks waiting for us that we do not have the knowledge to even assess. So what could I do to increase my awareness of technology or capacity building? What could I do? And just put your answers in the chat. What could I do to increase my knowledge of either technology or capacity building? And let's get your answers. Yeah, you might do some training. Absolutely, Anna. That might be something that you do. You could construct some training on the latest technology for whatever it is, or do some training about capacity building, or you might do some mentoring. I don't know, you could do that. You might recruit somebody. You know, you might recruit somebody in. You might decide to change strategy. I think that's a really interesting point, April. You know, you might realize, there might be lots of risks here. We might need to do something different. I think that's a really good, a very effective way of managing risk. You might, Deb is saying, you might bring somebody in. You might recruit somebody or bring in a consultant. Absolutely. And then, as you learn more, you do your training, your consultants help you, you recruit somebody, you revisit your risk management, and you say, okay, now you've got the expertise, maybe they can help you to identify what the risks are around technology and or capacity building. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because it's a little bit different, but it's I just think it's interesting that increasing our knowledge is a really effective way of also improving our ability to manage risks. So here we come back to our, this is a PMD Pro certified mouse who's very risk aware, but these are just, my 7 golden rules of risk. Integrate it, ongoing, who is going to do what, prioritize, communicate, do something about it and track it. Don't just let it ride. And at that point, because I am aware of time, I just want to quickly let everybody know that, you've got a lot of material that is available. You've got the LINGOs Project Services website is here. You've got online courses. Talk to each other in the way that you guys are. You're going to continue talking about, Anna and April, you're running almost identical projects. So if you talk to each other, you've got the PMD Pro guide is free. You've got a lot of tools on the website. In fact, you might even, I can't remember, in fact, I'm going to check right away because it might be that the tool is actually on the website. I'm going to go to there, to Tools and Forms. And yes, it is. That is very useful. So what I'm going to do, rather than sending it to you all, I'm going to put the link there, and you can get that tool straight from that link. Okay. So this is how you can continue learning. But are there any questions? Look, this is a moment that if you've got any question about anything at all to do with risk management, put them in the chat, take the microphones, right on the screen. I'm very happy to help. So very much over to you guys. So any questions about anything today? Do feel free to write in the chat or take the microphone. It's no problem at all. I can see that Anna is writing. Good question. Okay, Anna, what I'm going to try and do, I'm just going to put that on the screen. Okay, I'm going to try to get that onto the main screen. Right. Okay, April, no worries. Thank you for coming in. There we are. Okay, excellent. Right, I just wanted to get the question there. Make it. Do you need a strategy to deal with every risk you've identified? First of all, I think that's a fantastic question. So you definitely qualify for a round of applause and definitely a bit more virtual cake. All right, so that's great. I mean, I think you've got to revisit it, and you need. I mean, you need strategies for the high ones. You might need contingencies. It depends a bit on the risk. Sometimes you've got a risk that might be low probability but high impact, and you develop a contingency plan. And then you can, as the situation changes, you might decide to implement that plan or not. It depends a bit on the risk. But you don't need a strategy for, I mean, if you've got a risk that's like impact 1, probability 2. My advice would be to just keep it there on the back burner, but don't spend any real time focusing on it unless the situation changes. At least, that's my thought about that. Does that help? Okay, great. And then any other questions? Alejandra? Deb, you need to go. No, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it. Any more questions? Any questions from you, Alejandra? Okay, great question, Alejandro. What's the trigger? I think you discussed this. What's great about a risk register, all right, is that it allows you, so you identify the risks, you give them your scoring, and then you can talk to your supervisor and you could say, okay, at what point do you want to get involved? As a rule of thumb, I would say if the risk score goes above 50%, you probably want somebody senior to know about it, but it does depend on them. I mean, sometimes they're happier to give the project manager greater tolerance, sometimes they're not. But what it does, it gives you a really good mechanism to have this conversation with your supervisor, and then they think, oh, wow, that's great. Look, Alejandro's been really proactive about managing risk. So that's what I would suggest. Develop the risk register with your team, then you go to the boss and you ask her or him what you would, what they prefer, where they want to get involved. Does that help, Alejandra? Fantastic, excellent, great. Well, look, any more questions, do please let me know. You know, it's john@lingos.org, and I'm very happy to help. But we are now at the end of the session, so I'm going to take us to our giant coffee cup, and thank you so much for coming in, Alejandro. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to stop the recording.